At Makwande Nursing Home, most of the residents here share one thing in common. They are waiting for someone who never comes. But on one particular Friday, something unusual happened. Something that none of us expected. Every afternoon at exactly 3 p.m., Gogo Miriam, 86, sits by the window, watching the parking lot. She has done this every day for the last 3 years, always hoping to see her son's car. He promised he'd visit. The nurses stopped reminding her that he wasn't coming. What was the point? She wouldn't believe them anyway. Maybe he got busy, she says, as though he hasn't been busy for 3 whole years. That day, as she sat by the window, the rain started pouring. Heavy, loud, almost drowning out the beeping of the call buttons and the quiet hum of an oxygen machine down the hall. And then, for the first time, her son's car pulled up. Her son got out, holding an umbrella, but standing still for a long moment, like he wasn't sure if he should go in. Like he was afraid of what he'd see. Oh. And then, she got up. We all held our breath as she shuffled down the hallway. But before she could reach the door, she collapsed. The home was suddenly a blur of running nurses, emergency calls, and an oxygen tank being wheeled in. By the time the paramedics arrived, Miriam was already unresponsive. She never got to say a word to him. She waited 3 years for 5 more minutes. And she never got them. Miriam's son left that day in silence. He didn't cry, not in front of us, at least. Her room remained untouched for a week. Some of the nurses were too heartbroken to clear it. Her slippers were still by her bedside. Her unfinished knitting project sat on the table, waiting for hands that would never pay. Still empty at 3 p.m. Miriam's death hit the home hard. But if I'm being honest, she wasn't the only one living in a loop of unfulfilled promises and forgotten visits. There's Upatabo, who used to be a police officer, but now spends his days counting the tiles on the floor because his 6 children have no time for him. There's Uma Rose, who tells us stories about her youth, her husband, her children, yet no one ever comes to hear them firsthand. There's Mr. Zungu, whose wife died 5 years ago. He says he's ready to go too, but God forgot about me, just like my family did. The truth no one tells you. Most old people in nursing homes don't die from sickness first. They die from loneliness. 1 week after Miriam passed, something strange happened. A young woman walked into the home, holding a box of letters. Handwritten letters. She introduced herself as Nandi, Miriam's granddaughter. I found these in my dad's house, she said, tears in her eyes. She wrote to him every week. He never opened them. The nurses stood frozen. Some of us had to leave the room to hide our emotions. Nandi did something her father never did. She sat in the empty room and read every single letter.
Out loud. She cried, she laughed, and when she finished, she made a promise. I will visit, not just for her, for the ones who are still waiting. Over the next few weeks, something incredible started happening. Nandi started bringing her friends, her cousins, and even strangers who wanted to help. She posted about it online, and suddenly, young people who had never even met these elders started visiting. They played chess with Upatabo. They listened to Uma Rose's stories. They even set up a letter writing club where elders could write letters to their families and volunteers would personally deliver them. One by one, the empty chairs at the visiting hall began to fill up again. It wasn't perfect. Some families still never came. Some wounds couldn't be healed. But for the first time in years, the home wasn't just a waiting room for forgotten people. It was alive again. If you are watching this, ask yourself, when was the last time you called your grandparents? Do you know how much they miss you, even if they never say it? What if one day you decide to visit and it's too late? One visit, one phone call, one small moment of your time could be the difference between waiting in pain and living with love. Because one day, we will all be old too. And the hardest part of aging isn't the wrinkles, or the aching bones, or even the hospital visits. It's the silence.